Hi, how are you? I'm Mr. Muso. We are revising, we are talking about a European history. We want to talk about a question on Napoleon Bonaparte. We want to talk about the foreign policy of Napoleon. The question reads, to what extent did the continental system contribute to the downfall of Napoleon I? I'll take that question again. To what extent did the continental system contribute to the downfall of Napoleon I? So are we saying that the downfall of Napoleon the first, it was contributed by the continental system. So this statement is true to a lesser extent. The continental system, it played a part in the downfall of Napoleon. It was because he wanted to suffocate Britain economically. He wanted to stop small countries that were under his domain, to continue trading with Britain. So Britain was going to be on its knees economically. By going to be on its knees economically, Britain was going to seek or to consult Napoleon, and it was going to make Britain fall under Napoleonic rule. So this on its own, we see Napoleon introducing the Berlin Decree, which was meant to make the continental system a success. But Britain was quick to realize this, and she had to pass a counter of the Berlin Decree. She passed what was known as orders in council, and that led the continental system to be less successful. So the continental system now, it suffocated, it was meant to suffocate Britain economically. So many countries had to oppose Napoleon's continental system. We see Portugal opposing Napoleon's continental system, which led to the Peninsular War. We also see Russia later on opposing Napoleon's continental system, and Napoleon was defeated on the Moscow campaign. So the continental system, to a lesser extent, it contributed to the downfall of Napoleon. But however, there were other factors that led to the downfall of Napoleon. Other factors that also played a part in the downfall of Napoleon. Which were these factors? These are the factors that we want to talk about in detail so that we could answer this question. Number one, we talk about the issue of number one, we talk about the vastness of his empire. His empire was so vast. His empire was too big. It was now too large. And as a result of that, now it became impossible for him to effectively administer this big empire. So that on its own contributed to his downfall. The vastness of his empire led his downfall to be unavoidable. So you talk about the vastness of his empire. Number two, you also talk about the rise of nationalism and liberalism. These factors led to the downfall of Napoleon. We see that the rise of nationalism and liberalism in Austria, in Prussia, pushed the people in these countries to fight against Napoleon. And we see Prussia joining, becoming the member of the Third Coalition, fighting against Napoleon. We see Austria fighting against Napoleon at the Battle of Wagram. That on its own led Napoleon to be weakened, and it led Napoleon eventually to be defeated. So the rise of nationalism led to the downfall of Napoleon. It contributed to the downfall of Napoleon. Napoleon was also defeated. Why? It was because people were sick and tired of continuous wars. People were always involved in wars. People were always fighting against the other allied powers. So that on its own led people to be tired of wars, and they no longer were so much interested in these wars. So that explains why Napoleon in 1813, 1814, 1815, eventually he was defeated. So that on its own contributed to the downfall of Napoleon. You move on, you also talk about the Moscow campaign. It also led to the downfall of Napoleon. On the Moscow campaign, we see that he did not think that this war was going to take a long period of time. He was not fully prepared for this war. Weather also affected him. His soldiers died because of winter. So that on its own affected him, leading to his downfall. So the methods of fighting that were used by Russia used the scorched earth policy, the guerrilla warfare. Napoleon was not familiar with these methods of fighting. That on its own contributing to his downfall. So the Moscow campaign led Napoleon to be defeated, and by so doing, we see him fleeing the country after being defeated on this Moscow campaign. The formation of the third coalition with Austria, Prussia, Russia also worsened the problems of Napoleon, leading to his downfall. We also talk about the joining of Britain, forming the fourth coalition. It also worsened the problems of Napoleon, leading to his downfall. So the formation of the fourth coalition also led Napoleon to be defeated. You also talk about the Peninsular War. On the Peninsular War, Napoleon was defeated. That Spanish ulcer encouraged other countries to renew their wars against Napoleon, leading to his downfall. So the Peninsular War was also responsible for the downfall of Napoleon. Then you move on, you also talk about the issue of death of his generals. Several of his generals, they were dead. So the new generals that were there were young. They were not experienced as the old generals. So that on its own paralyzed Napoleon. It crippled Napoleon, leading to his downfall. Added to that was desertion. So many of his soldiers, they deserted from the war, and that affected Napoleon, leading to his downfall. So he was defeated because of desertion. He was affected by desertion. So many soldiers, they to desert from the war. Napoleon was also defeated. Why? It was because he was now too fat. He was no longer as energetic as he was. That on its own also led to his downfall. Why? It was because of his health. He was no longer energetic as he was when he came to power in 1799. Then you move on. Napoleon, he was also defeated. Why was he also defeated? It was because of the installation of his brothers and relatives. People opposed, were not in favor of his brothers and relatives. That on its own affected him, and it led to his downfall. Why? It is because people were questioning, why are we being ruled by relatives? Why are we being ruled by the friends of Napoleon? That on its own led people to rise, and eventually Napoleon was defeated. So we have seen that there were several factors. We have seen that there were so many factors that led to the downfall of Napoleon. And we are saying that to a great extent, these factors contributed to his downfall, although the Continental system played a part, but it was to a lesser extent. So that is how we answer this question. Let me repeat this question again. To what extent did the Continental system contribute to the downfall of Napoleon the First? That is what we have on this question. So this question, we are saying it is to a lesser extent. Thank you so much. I'm Mr. Muso.